Welcome to Blackbriar Gaming. Today, we'll be looking at the Legiones Astartes Unaligned Rites of War. That is, those generic Rites of War that you can find in the Legiones Astartes Army Book. Over 3 separate videos, we'll be looking at all 9 Rites of War, analysing them against 3 key metrics: fun, lore, and power. I'm also keen to look at which legions do well selecting each of the Rites of War. This is part 3 of 3 for this series. This video will look at the Armoured Spearhead, Underworld Assault, and Brethren of Iron Rites of War. Just a quick note before we get into it, a subscribe and a like really helps us reach a bigger audience. So if you enjoy the video, please hit those buttons down below. We've also recently affiliated with War Office Game Supplies, so if you live in the UK and you're looking to buy some Heresy or other Games Workshop miniatures online, check out our affiliate link in the description for some great savings and a chance to help out the channel. Firstly, a quick note on unlocking Rites of War. You need to either have access to the Master of Legion special rule, usually through a Primarch special character, Praetor, or Centurion with the Delegatus console upgrade, or the Rite of War allows you to upgrade a specific model or unit to have the Master of the Legion special rule. Okay, with that out of the way, let's look at our first Rite of War. Today, that will be Armoured Spearhead. Let's have a look at its effects and limitations. So, effects. All units in a detachment using this Rite of War, eligible to take a Rhino, may instead select a Land Raider Proteus carrier as a dedicated transport if they number 10 models or less. Next up, Legion Predator Squadrons may be selected as troop choices. Legion Sicaran Squadrons can be selected as elites choices. And in a detachment using this Rite of War, a single Legion Sicaran Squadron or Legion Predator Squadron, composed of a single model, must be selected as a HQ choice. It gains a Master of the Legion special rule and must be selected as your Warlord. It has to have the Master of Armor Warlord trait, which reads: a Warlord with this trait gains a Master of the Legion special rule and a 5+ invul save and increases its ballistic skill by 1, that's really nice, but may not select a command squad, which makes a lot of sense. In this case, the model must be selected as the Warlord despite having the vehicle unit type, and regardless of any other rules that would require another model to be selected as the Warlord, such as certain characters and Primarchs, which then cannot be selected. Now, limitations. All units in a detachment using this Rite of War with the infantry type must begin the battle embarked upon a model with the transport subtype. Any infantry models in a detachment using this Rite of War, both those deployed on the battlefield and in reserve, that are not embarked upon a model with the transport subtype at the beginning of the controlling player's first turn, must be removed as casualties. That's an interesting thing to say. They could just say you can't take them, but instead you can take them if you really want to. That's okay, sure. Maybe if your transport blows up, or I don't know what's happening there. Anyway, a detachment using this Rite of War may not select any fortifications. A detachment using this Rite of War may not include any models with the movement characteristic of 0 or nil, and this Rite of War may only be selected for an army's primary detachment. Okay, so that is the Armoured Spearhead. How fun is this to run? Well, mechanized armies are always a blast to play, in my opinion, and reasonably easy to put together. I remember it being such a treat when you could finally run a fully armoured Imperial Guard army in 40k, and Horus Heresy has you covered right from the get-go. The mainstays of this army will be your Predators and your Sicarans. Your Predators in particular have a lot of options, so you can put together squadrons that feel diverse and can deal with a real range of threats. Moving bulk tanks and transports across the table also feels fantastic, and it's almost mandatory to make those vrooming noises as you do so. This Rite of War gets the fun tick of approval, and with the plastic Heresy vehicles pouring out of Games Workshop at the moment, it's going to be far more affordable putting this together in the new edition. From a lore perspective, it's got really good narrative potential with a fully armoured force, and once again, any legion can justifiably pull it off. In fact, it would be rare for most legions to deploy to a planet, as opposed to a boarding action for instance, without considerable armoured support. From a preference perspective, there are certainly some legions who are more vehicle-friendly. Iron Hands and Iron Warriors come to mind. The clue is in the iron part. But you better believe the Space Wolves and World Eaters had big armoured contingents, and the Raven Guard had a healthy supply of tanks to back up their sneakiness. It actually makes more sense, tactically and narratively, to have tanks fighting en masse, rather than the onesies and twosies that you usually see in Heresy armies. There's tons of hobby potential here too. Your command tank is a great opportunity to really bling out a Predator or a Sicaran, either through sweet conversions or an over-the-top paint scheme. I've seen some amazing freehand work, in particular, done on certain tanks that would really suit this army. There's plenty of cool things you could do with each vehicle squadron to make them unique and characterful as well. They could be siege tanks, and you load them up with a bunch of extra frontal armor. Perhaps they've been operating in a hostile environment and they've got lots of battle damage. Or maybe your force is a lighter mechanized recon contingent. You could cut down your vehicles to give them some extra speed at the cost of protection. From a narrative sense, of course, the rules would stay the same. So the lore gets a big tick as well there. From a power perspective, I think vehicles are going to feel a little underwhelming in 2nd edition Heresy, due to an increased number of shots from medium anti-armor weapons, multi-melters picking up twin-linked, and las cannons gaining sunder, amongst a bunch of other really small changes that start to impact vehicles. They also just don't put out as much firepower point for point as infantry generally will, and are far harder to buff from various special rules or pieces of war gear. Squadrons of vehicles, which this Rite of War probably needs you to take, are at a bit of a disadvantage, ensuring that your opponent is never wasting shots from big anti-armor units, and potentially losing you multiple vehicles in single shooting attacks or assaults. However, as you cross the barrier into mass vehicle territory, you start to diminish the effectiveness of much of an opponent's army, making most of their anti-infantry weapons useless until you start to disembark. This Rite of War will vary wildly in how effective it is based on the opponent's army and the mission you're playing. If your opponent only has a couple of decent anti-armored units and you can shut them down in your first turn, you can then pretty much dominate the table with relative impunity, assuming you don't need to get out of your transports to secure objectives until later in the game. So as I said, the mission is going to come into it, and it's quite mission dependent. Don't forget that, even with this Rite of War, your vehicles can never capture or deny objectives. I'm going to rate this Rite of War as a fun option rather than something that's consistently competitive across the spectrum of missions. Now, which Legion does this best? Death Guard, hands down, do vehicles better, and is subsequently the top pick for this Rite of War. Counting as stationary when moving at any speed is just outrageous. It essentially removes one of the biggest weaknesses of vehicles. Imperial Fists get their +1 to hit to a number of weapons that vehicles want to be equipping, getting a +1 to hit on the Sicaran's Accelerator Autocannon and the Kratos Battle Cannon are probably the most notable benefits here. Salamanders and Iron Hands with their It Will Not Die bonuses are fine, but not overly exciting or inspiring. Similarly, the various legions that have bonuses to ramming don't fill me with confidence, and there's quite a few too. Blood Angels, Space Wolves come to mind. Sons of Horus probably are the winners in this category. I believe they get a +3 to the number of rams they do. I don't think this is a really powerful mechanic or one that's overly consistent, but I would love to see an army based around it and just going full tilt forward with big vehicles and a lot of them to try and ram your opponent off the table. It'd be good for a laugh, if nothing else. So that is Armoured Spearhead. Next up is Underworld Assault. Let me just turn to it in the book. Here we go, the effects and limitations. So, all units in this detachment eligible to take a Rhino transport as a dedicated transport may instead select a Legion Termite Assault Drill as a dedicated transport. Very good. Legion Termite Assault Drills may be selected as fast attack choices and heavy support choices, so you can just pack a ton of them in there. And all units in a detachment using this Rite of War that begin play on the battlefield and not in reserve gain the Stubborn special rule until the end of the turn, in which any units assigned to a subterranean assault are deployed onto the battlefield. Now, I will talk more about the subterranean assault, which is what this all revolves around, in the power section, but essentially your giant drills, full of marines, emerge from the earth and cause wanton destruction. Now, the limitations. All infantry units that do not have a version of the bulky special rule in a detachment using this Rite of War must begin the battle embarked on a Legion Termite Assault Drill. So units like your Terminators, for instance, or all your assault squads, they have the bulky special rule and can therefore start on the table. A detachment using this Rite of War may not select any fortification choices, and any models selected as part of a detachment using this Rite of War that are not Legion Termite Assault Drills or embarked on a Legion Termite Assault drill may not be placed into reserve and cannot take part in any alternative deployments. So you can't have Assault Marines coming down from Deep Strike in the same detachment that you're running some subterranean assaults. So look, there it is. Now, the fun side. You know what's awesome? Giant drills bursting up from the ground into the midst of your enemy. You know what's even cooler? When those drills are filled with post-human monsters ready to jump out and cause mayhem in amongst your opponent. This Rite of War is leaps and bounds better than Drop Pod Assault for its effectiveness and the fun you're going to get out of it on the table. It's not fun putting a bunch of drop pods on the table and getting all your guys killed. It is fun chucking up a bunch of drills, weathering that interceptor firepower, and starting to do some damage. Now, those Forge World Termite Assault Drill models are also absolutely fantastic, though they can be relatively easy substituted if you don't want to pay the $200 a pop tax on those ones. So have a look at some alternatives out there, some 3D printed solutions, even some plastic toys that are just drill-like in nature that you can start to use en masse for your Legion army. From a lore perspective, I think the lore is really great on these guys. If you haven't read Sat 9 and you're interested in some subterranean assault action, do yourself a favor and check it out for some inspiration, even if the assault does go a little pear-shaped. Now, unfortunately, you can't put models with Terminator armor into a Termite Assault drill, which, in my view, loses this Rite of War exactly 3 lore points. I would love to build a Sons of Horus force led by Abaddon using Underworld Assault based on the Siege of Terror books. But you can't. Abaddon is in Terminator armor and cannot go into one of these drills. So be it. Otherwise, this Rite of War exudes narrative, whether it's an Iron Warrior force using the drills to enter an enemy palace, or the Dark Angels fighting a particularly nasty breed of Xenos in their underground empire. Lots of cool options here. Power. Let me just reiterate that this Rite of War is better from a gameplay perspective in almost every way than Drop Pod Assault is, which is its obvious comparison. Here's 5 reasons why. 1. Not only can you have a portion of your army deployed normally on the battlefield, though notably only infantry with the bulky special rule and non-infantry units, which is quite a lot of units, but those units get the stubborn special rule until the end of your turn that your subterranean assault turns up. So stubborn and a bunch of units you can put on the table. Great. 2. If your assault is disordered, your opponent can only move your drill to a location that is within 12 inches of your first deployed model. Now that's compared to 24 inches for a disordered Deep Strike Assault. Or I should say Drop Pod Assault. I think they're the same. 3. Your infantry don't have to deploy from the drills prior to the enemy getting a chance to make their interceptor reactions. So any anti-infantry fire that has interceptor, which will be quite a few squads, notably tactical squads with augury scanners, for instance, it'll have very little effect. Certainly your tac squads with all their bolters, unless they're doing something particularly funky, are just going to ping off your assault drills, as unlike drop pods, your Marines don't have to burst out of them the second that they arrive on the table. Number 4, you do D6 plus 3 strength 6 AP4 hits to all enemy units that are within 6 inches of a unit deployed as part of this subterranean assault. Though it isn't pinning, you're still going to do a bunch of damage, which is nice. Just a little benefit, just for funsies. And 5, after deploying, you can still move your Termite Assault drills to get into range with their awesome melter cutters and deploy your troops, ready to decimate your opponent's army with whatever shooting they decide to unleash. That's compared to drop pods that come armed with some pretty lackluster weapons, and a bunch of your troops are already going to be dead from the interceptors that you had to cop on your infantry. So that's the subterranean assault. Those are kind of the bonuses of it, and it's just a much better rule than, now it's not called drop pod assault. Let me just check. It's a much better rule than, it is. Than the drop pod assault special rule. It just gives you so much more. It's much more survivable. It's much easier to pull off. Big fan. This Rite of War works really well as either a full army or an allied detachment. It looks like a blast to play and will have a serious impact on the table. Make sure you put units into those Termite Assault drills that are going to do some serious damage in the shooting phase. That's the key here. So we're looking at, and you want to take advantage of that short-range firepower as well, because that's the whole point. So we're looking at Seeker squads, we're looking at tactical support squads with your plasma guns or your melter guns. We're looking at veterans kitted out with combi weapons. Mortalis Destroyer squads are a cool choice. and even tactical squads from certain legions that can get some spicier ammunition and shoot a few more shots on the move are going to do work here. Now, which legion does this best? Death Guard, once again, they keep coming up, don't they? Death Guard are obnoxiously good at running this Rite of War. Not only can the Termite Assault drills move their full 8 inches after bursting through the ground and still fire its weapons with no penalty, but you can have your units disembarking and still firing heavy weapons at full ballistic skill. Death Guard heavy support squads armed with multi-melters coming out of Subterranean Assault is going to be utterly terrifying to certain opponents. Other than that, Wordbearers and Salamanders do very well with this Rite of War due to their Legion-specific weapons. The 17th with their Warp Fire Blasters, and the 18th with their Dragon's Breath weapons. Super strong short-range firepower that'll make sure you're doing more damage to your enemy on the turn you arrive than they can do to you. Following that theme, legions that have powerful units with short-range firepower, such as Dark Angels with their Interrupter squads, or Alpha Legion with Headhunter kill teams, would also do well taking this Rite of War. So that is the the Underworld Assault Rite of War, which uses the Subterranean Assault special rule. I think it's really good, lots of fun, really powerful on the table. Last up today is the Brethren of Iron Rite of War. So the effects and limitations, here we go. Kastlak's Battle Automator Maniples may be taken as non-compulsory troops choices. Vorak's Battle Automator Maniples may be taken as non-compulsory fast attack choices, and Domitar Battle Automator Maniples may be taken as non-compulsory elite choices in a detachment using this Rite of War. In addition, a single Athanatar Siege Automator Maniple, those names, of no more than one model may be taken as a non-compulsory heavy support choice. Cool. Any Legion Tech Marine in a detachment using this Rite of War may be upgraded to have a Cortex controller at 20 points. Now, the note here, some of those units might have sounded a bit strange, especially to new players. They will be coming in the Liber Mechanicum book, which is, of course, not out at the time of recording, but is due out, I believe, in August of 2022, so not too long to wait. Now, limitations, quite a few. I'll just paraphrase here. You cannot have more models with the automated unit type than you do models without the automated unit type. Sure. At least one model with a Cortex controller must be included for every 3 models with the automated unit type in this detachment, and no models or units in the detachment may be given the Paragon of Metal special rule, something coming in the Mechanicum book, and a model with the Forge Lord Consolaris upgrade must be taken as the compulsory HQ choice for an army using this Rite of War, but need not be chosen as the Warlord. In fact, it then notes that this will preclude certain other characters from being included in the detachment, and means that in most cases, both a Legion Praetor and a Legion Forge Lord must be taken, just in case there was any confusion there. So from a fun perspective, while we don't have the second ed rules for Mechanicum units yet, it's not too much of a stretch to imagine that this Rite of War is going to feel great on the table. At least for the player running it, if not necessarily their opponent. We'll have to wait and see. Mechanicum units have traditionally been absolutely brutal, and when paired with the more numerous and defensively focused infantry of the legions, can make for a really interesting force to play with. Mixing units from different organizations like this also makes for a really diverse hobby experience. The joy of taking a break from painting more power armor cannot be understated. It's also going to be quite a unique force that, though its Rite of War through its Rite of War limitations, has to stick rather closely to a themed army build. One point of disappointment here, it would have been really great if you could have given the Forge Lord the Master of the Legion special role, as having to take a Praetor and a Forge Lord is quite a tax to pay when you want to be spending as many points as you can on hulking monsters of the Mechanicum, and it also means you're not taking any other HQ choices unless you take a separate detachment. Lore perspective. The narrative potential for this Rite of War is really nice. It gives you plenty of options to create a rich story through the way you build and paint your Mechanicum units. Is this perhaps maybe an Iron Hands army post-Isfam that has bolstered its depleted ranks with Mechanicum units, gifted through their close ties with still loyal Forge Worlds? Or perhaps it's a Wordbearers army that has been working with the Dark Mechanicum to create demon-infused monstrosities of tainted flesh and experimental machines. Now, this last one has real appeal for me. I'm picturing a lot of chains, bulging muscles, and really sick conversions, including a mix of 40k Chaos Demon engines, Dark Elder, and Skaven bits. So there's lots of fun you can have with this from a narrative perspective. Go nuts. Do not feel constrained by the miniatures out there. Mechanicum they're born to be converted, and there's so much cool stuff out there from GW and, of course, other suppliers that you can put together and make a really interesting army. Power and which legion does this best. Now, when it comes to power and discussing the legions for this Rite of War, we'll really have to wait until we get the rules for the Mechanicum units. At a guess, however, I'd say this Rite of War is going to do just fine on the table, and any legion will likely be happy to run it. From what I can tell, the Mechanicum units will not benefit from your Legion special rules, so the legions that will benefit the most from this Rite of War are those whose Legion-specific units are a bit lacking, and they need help potentially from some massive robots that can put out decent firepower and still happily take on a Dreadnought in combat. And that's all I'll say for Brethren of Fire today. We'll have another look, I'm sure, when the Mechanicum book comes out. For now, that brings us to the end of our Heresy chats. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments whether you're planning on building towards any of these Rites of War, what legions you're choosing, and how you're going to go about it. Importantly, make sure to keep rolling those dice and getting hyped for Heresy.